morning, everybody, and also good morning, Professor William Kirby.
Good morning, everyone.
Yes, so it's a great pleasure for me to host this CCG special dialogue. My name is Henry Huiyao Wang. I'm the president and founder of the Center for China and Globalization. And the CCG special dialogue is actually conducted for the last 3 years with over 40, 50 very well-known global opinion leaders. And here today we're at the Harvard campus, at the Winter Library, and also at the heart of the Harvard campus. So welcome to this special dialogue program. And we are thrilled today, actually, to have a dialogue with Professor William Kirby. And William Kirby is a T.M. Chan Professor of China Studies at Harvard University and a Spengler Family Professor of Business Administration at Harvard Business School. And he's a Harvard professor, also distinguished service professor. He serves as the chairman of the Harvard China Fund, the University Academic Venture Fund for China, and faculty chair of the Harvard Center Shanghai, Harvard's first university-wide center located outside the United States. So this is really a very great achievement, I think, that Bill is achieving. And also, he's the former dean of Harvard Faculty of Arts and Sciences, and he has published and quoted in many distinguished, well-known journals, papers, and of course, you have many, many books too, and many, many case studies. I mean, the list is very long. So just to open this dialogue, because we have actually have done quite a few dialogue with our Harvard distinguished professors, including Professor Larry Summers, Professor Joseph Nye, Professor Graham Allison, and just to mention a few. So this time we want to engage our dialogue with Bill. I mean, you've been engaged with Harvard Business School for a long time. You've been in various leading positions. I remember I was here 2011 as a senior fellow at Harvard Kennedy School. You were looking after the Fairbank Center. And also we had the chance to talk then. But of course, in the last 13, 14 years, many things has changed. And so your work examined the China business, economic, and political development in the international context. So particularly, you are talking. You just come back from China. You talked to me just now, and then you have been teaching business, doing business in China, and quite a number of courses at the Harvard Business School. So I know that you actually, I want you to give an overview of what's the global situation, but I really want to talk a bit more on this great book you just recently published. It's Empire of Ideas, Creating the Modern University from Germany to America to China, which published by Harvard University Press. So perhaps you could give some opening remark, but also especially your latest new book. We really would like to introduce to our CCD audience, both in China, outside China. So
Thank you very much, Henry. It's a pleasure to have you back here at Harvard. Yeah. We look forward to having you early and often in the future. So this book is an outgrowth both of my long-standing interest in China and China's development in an international context over the last several centuries, but also comes from my own experience as Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences here at Harvard, which is about half of Harvard University, that school, the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. And it asks the question, and a very simple question, the Germans defined the modern research university in the 19th century. Universities are more than a millennium old in the West, but the modern research university, a place like Harvard or a place like Tsinghua or Fudan, this model of a university is only about 233 years old this year. Founded in Berlin in 1810, and it becomes the model of all modern universities throughout the world. The Germans define excellence in the 19th century. The Americans arguably take it to another level by the end of the 20th century. And the question I am asking is whether or not Chinese universities will define global standards in the 21st century. So in education, as in other areas, is the 21st century to be the Chinese century. And so it's a series of case studies of individual universities, German, American, and Chinese, as well as a broad overview of higher education in an area of enormous cooperation and competition right now, in particular across the Pacific. And I'm just back from China. My mission in this last trip to China was to re-engage our academic partners in China, knowing that any great university, and we like to think here at Harvard that we're not a bad one, that any great university has to engage with the fastest growing system of higher education in the world in quality as well as quantity, and that is, of course, the system in China. So I met with my counterparts and with the leaders of a number of great universities, Beida, Tsinghua, Fudan, and others, also in Hong Kong, to get a sense of, how do we, after 3 years of COVID and after this serious downturn in U.S.-China relations, how do we reset our partnerships for the mutual benefit of our faculty and our students, and indeed of both of our countries?
Yeah, thank you, Bill. That's really fascinating. I think that you are probably the most authoritative and also highly relevant person, expert to also talk about this education and, of course, the origin of modern university. In your book, you talk about the university, how they started first in Germany, and I know that you also speak you speak German, French, yep, and many European language, and then, of course, the Harvard itself. I mean, how they moved to the U.S. and then the Harvard campus. I mean, we see now here it's been filled with visitors on the regular basis. So you can see it's become the capital of the knowledge, probably for many universities to model down on Harvard's model. But again, also Chinese universities are really rising, and also even they have a relatively shorter history. But also if you talk about Asian time, China always have some kind of study, scholars academy like Yuan,
sure.
Like that. But I think modern university, it's really true that has been the driving force of technology, science, innovation, and of course leading hubs for R&D. And so for this, so what do you think of the differences that you are the expert on this book, that the European universities, American university, and now Chinese universities, we are now probably the three leading forces for the future. What is your comparison and findings and some of the ideas?
Well, the reason, let me take a step backwards a bit. Sure. The reason I call the book Empires of Ideas.
Yes.
思想之帝国.
Okay.
We think of it in Chinese.
Yeah.
What makes a country great? What makes a country enduringly great?
Yeah.
Is it the size of the economy? That's important. Is it the size of an army or a navy? That may be important. But the countries that have set global standards in multiple ways over the last several centuries have also been leaders in culture and ideas. You look at the Qingguo in the 18th century in Asia, or you look at France in the 18th century in Europe, or in the 19th century, Britain and Germany becoming global powers, but also by the strength of their ideas and the force of, and particularly in the German case, the power of their universities. And in the United States, this country has become the greatest center of higher education in the world for the moment, in part because we attract talent from all over the world, in our students and in our faculty in particular. And if we were not open to this talent from all over the world, and if that talent did not wish to come here, we would not be doing so well today. And right outside, we are meeting today in Widener Library, the largest university library in the United States. And right outside this library is a stele, a shibei, that was given by the Chinese alumni of Harvard University in 1936 on the 300th anniversary of Harvard. Harvard is much older as a university than it is as a research university.
Sure.
So we were founded in the late Ming Dynasty.
That's right.
After all.
Yes.
Although nobody at Harvard knew that.
Okay.
But in 1936, This stele was dedicated by the representative of Peking University, of Beijing Daxue, Dr. Hu Shi. Hu Shi came to Harvard and was given an honorary degree as the representative of Beida at our 300th anniversary. And he inscribes that stele with a message that it is learning, not power politics. He doesn't say does not make a country great, but he says, above all, a culture grows and a nation goes strong by attention to its culture. But a culture can become enduringly strong only by attention to learning.
Yes.
By 学 in Chinese, as he put it, and I can show you this afterwards.
Yes.
Or Wissenschaft, as you would say in the German case, the idea of learning as science.
Yes.
And this is what has really propelled countries to the forefront of global influence over the course of the last several centuries. So an investment in education, and no country knows this better in its long history than China. An investment in education is the surest investment one can have for the future of one's country.
So great, Bill, that you mentioned all those differences, and also probably the core competence of a modern university. I think you have strike me, and then you really pick up some of the keyword, the talent. Where university has to attract talents from all over the world. I think Harvard probably is the best example, and also many universities in the U.S. and other countries too. So this is something probably we can learn from, is that you being the dean of arts and humanitarian for a long time at Harvard, you're very knowledgeable for the core competence, how university is run, and what are the key competence. Of course, this talent. So in that sense, I think probably Harvard has a very high percentage of international faculties, or people from different parts of the world. Maybe you can give a little bit introduction there, because we are at Harvard, sitting in the large library of the U.S. campus, probably.
So this is actually very relevant to the current situation in U.S.-China relations.
That's right.
Where COVID and for other political reasons, the flow of talent across the Pacific has been somewhat interrupted. But a great university has to be a place where you attract talent from around the world. China has the great advantage of having not just this enormous and talented population at home, but the Chinese diaspora, which can come back and succeed in China, but also by welcoming international scholars as well. Sometimes the Chinese government is criticized, I think wrongly, for its 1,000 Talents program.
Yes.
But when I was Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, I had a 1,000 Talents program as well.
Okay.
I would steal faculty from anywhere.
That's right.
A job is to bring the absolute best students and faculty together. That's the most important job of a dean, is the appointment of senior scholars.
That's right, yes.
Who can teach the extraordinary people that we're fortunate enough to bring to this university. And it's important that we be open to the world in order to do that. And when you think of why this matters, not everything keeps going up. The Americans are doing well in higher education today, but there are many warning signs in the American higher education system, particularly in the funding and the decreasing funding of public higher education in the United States. But the Germans defined higher education for more than a century, from 1810 until about the early 1930s. And the influence was so broad. Harvard around since the late Ming Dynasty, but it becomes a serious research university only by emulating the German model with the founding of our Graduate School of Arts and Sciences in the 1870s. And other American universities all follow this model. You've been to Stanford University, probably.
Yes.
Do you know what the motto of Stanford University is?
Well, I think they do a lot with innovation, with startups, and
they do today, but that's not what their original model, still their motto today, is Die Luft der Freiheit weht. It's in German.
Oh, I see.
So most people at Stanford don't know how to pronounce it.
Okay.
It means the wind of freedom blows.
I see.
And so they are also modeled from their founding on a German experience of the German experience in higher education.
Yes.
But this is how things decline, too. The wind of freedom stopped blowing in Germany with the National Socialist seizure of power. in 1933.
Okay.
The great University of Berlin, the model for all modern universities, is destroyed from within by the Nazis and then from without by the Second World War.
I see.
And today, every university wants to know where it stands in the global rankings.
Yeah.
But if we had had global rankings 100 years ago of the kind that we have today, probably 8 of the top 10 universities in the world would have been German universities. And the other 2 in Oxford and Cambridge, no American university.
I see. I see.
But today, very seldom does a German university get into the top 50, whereas 5 Chinese universities have risen into the top 50 in many of these rankings. So it shows you that the world changes, and it can change actually very fast indeed.
So that's great. I mean, that's good to know the evolution of this modern university system and how that actually, from European to America and now China. And so higher education is one of the few industries in which the United States is still the #1 now. I mean, counting the top 50 or top 100, I mean, most of our universities are from U.S. So how long you think that, that leading position that U.S. can maintain? But you mentioned some of the problem of funding and things like that. I mean, I know university in China also have challenges, like they have produced large number of graduates, like 12 million a year, but then
jobs are more difficult.
Youth unemployment is now at about almost 20%. So that's also a big challenge. So what do you think about the dominance of the university in the U.S.? I think that's probably one of the core competencies, because U.S. is attract talents from all over the world. And then, most of the Nobel laureates work in the United States. And if the U.S. universities keeping such a strong position, then they're automatically attracting talents. We're giving the best immigration policy. So what do you think that for university in Europe, and particularly in China, can improve, and how we can really, using your words, maybe if in the future, leading together or develop together, and how can we learn from each other?
Well, I would say that in my book, the case study that is the biggest warning sign for the American university system is the University of California at Berkeley. It is just one example of the slow motion defunding of public higher education in the United States over the last several decades. Today, 44 out of 50 American states are spending less per student on higher education than they did in real terms in 2008. 44 out of 50 states. So that's where 80% of American students get their education, is in public universities. And if these great institutions, Berkeley, Michigan, University of Washington, University of Illinois, these great public institutions decline, I can guarantee you that the great private institutions, Harvard, Yale, Chicago, Stanford, we will also decline, because we compete for the same faculty, the same graduate students, same senior administrators, and competition in education, like in any business, is the key to excellence. And without it, you actually will decline. So this is a big warning sign for the United States. I don't believe, I'm not one who believes that one country has to win and another one has to lose in any competition, whether it's in business, whether it's in semiconductors, or in higher education. No country, however, today is investing more in higher education than China. No country has seen universities rise as rapidly to international recognition as China. And we think of this as happening overnight, but Chinese universities have a 130-year-old history, getting back to 1893 in the founding of what is today Wuhan Daxue, the oldest Chinese university, founded by Zhang Zhidong as the Self-Strengthening Institute in Wuhan. And these universities grew through the late Qing into the Republican period, the Beiyang period. They thrived under the Guomenjengfu of the nationalist period. They survived the Japanese invasion. And today they are back, building on a strong foundation of pre-1949 universities, but also taking it to an altogether different level in terms of their global capacities. And it's one of the things when one thinks about universities, if you look to the long future, everyone worries about what will happen this or next or other year. But universities have to take the long view. They survive governments. They survive administrations. You know, Harvard has survived. We were founded when this was a colony of Great Britain. It survived the American Revolutionary War, and indeed part of the war was fought right here. Troops were billeted on the Harvard campus. The American Civil War, multiple incarnations, multiple American regimes, governments and administrations over this period of time. But you have to take the long view as to where you will be. And our long view is that engagement with the rest of the world is essential for the future of Harvard and for American higher education. To take a counterexample, and the leading Chinese universities all know this. They absolutely know this. And they share the values of their counterparts in the United States and in Europe. But recently, 3 Chinese universities withdrew from global rankings in order to pursue what they called a 中国特色的教育, education with Chinese characteristics. Now, that's not a terrible thing. Of course, every country has its own characteristics. But that meant that they were no longer also comparing themselves and competing against also the best in the world. That is not a good sign, I think. Isolation, self-isolation, is basically a death sentence for universities anywhere in the world. And if the Americans become isolationist in restricting scholars from coming to the United States, or if Chinese universities no longer are comparing themselves also to the best in the world, then we're all collectively in some trouble.
Yeah, that's a good advice, actually. You know, you have vividly demonstrated how university develop. For example, the American university learned from Germany and European universities, and I'm actually also very true. I mean, the longest running institution is in the world. I mean, we haven't heard a company for several hundred years, but we hear about a company, a university for several hundred years, which is still going very strong. Harvard is a good example. And also, that's true. I think I really highly echo your thinking that university has to engage with the world, has to really compare with the world, and then put into the in a big global environment, and then let's thrive and let's compete and let's cooperate. So,
the person who articulated what a great university could be, better than any university president that I've ever seen, is the Tsai Yuen-pei.
Yes.
Tsai Yuen-pei as chancellor of Peking University during the Wusi Yundong period.
Yes.
And he said that students had to have a 世界观的教育.
Yeah.
A education with a worldview.
That's correct.
He believed, following the German model, in what the Germans call Lehrfreiheit, the freedom to teach, and Lernfreiheit, the freedom to learn on the part of students. And he brought to the Beida campus, great liberal intellectuals like Hu Shi, but also China's first Marxists in academic life, Chen Duxiu, Li Dajiao, these individuals, so that the students could choose for themselves what to believe and learn from themselves how to be productive citizens for the new China of the 20th century.
That's right. That's right. You have a very deep knowledge on China.
And if you think of course, what is today Beida's great counterpart in the same city, Tsinghua.
Yeah.
Tsinghua University, founded as a prep school to send Chinese to the United States.
Yeah.
In 1911, the last year of the Qing. And today, and I was very fortunate to be the senior advisor to Mr. Stephen Schwartzman.
Yes.
And to President Chen Jining and then President Zhou Yong of Tsinghua University, in establishing the Suzhimen Shuyuan, this global college, a college of global affairs at Tsinghua, which is bringing the best and the brightest of the world from China and from around the world to Tsinghua University. And its aspiration is to be the Rhodes Scholarship of the 21st century.
That's right.
So when you think of this, think of the ambition. Here's Tsinghua, founded as a place to send Chinese away, now welcoming the best and the brightest of the world to Beijing. And their message is that why would a young student want to have a Rhodes Scholarship? Why would you want to study in England, a cold, rainy, foggy, self-isolating island off the coast of Europe, when you can be in Beijing at the center of this great and global rising power. That's the ambition.
Yes, yes.
Whether they succeed or not, we shall see.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I know Schwarzman College very well. My son went there. Okay,
Is that right?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So the Dean Xuelan is a good friend, and
Xuelan is a wonderful, wonderful
So
leader.
we actually, I'm a mentor also. I took interviews for them from time to time.
Oh, 感谢, 感谢.
Yeah, screening the applicants. But it's really it's absolutely. You mentioned Stanford, you mentioned Harvard. They all learn from the university from Germany and many years ago. And actually, you are right. Tsinghua and even Peking University, Yanjin was also with American model at the beginning. So I think those are really that you're absolutely correct. The engagement with the world exchanges, and that particularly the leading university exchanges among each other is crucial, and that also attract talents from all over the world. And so that part China is still lacking the United States for attracting talents from all over the world, not just diaspora, but really global talents.
It's a challenge. It is a challenge, and the language issues are big.
Sure.
But it's doable. So many courses are now taught at Tsinghua and Beida, also in English.
That's right.
Or in other languages.
Yes.
And so, but it is a challenge, but it's one that can be overcome if the flow of ideas is unimpeded.
That's right.
Anything that stops the flow of ideas from one country to another is a source of concern and will lead to academic decline.
Yeah. So I think as a veteran educator, experienced in U.S. and China for so many years. So that's really a great advice you've been providing. So I think it would be really give a lot of food for thought at how a good university, how a better education system, and also how the talent recruiting system can really facilitate the growth of the modern university. So you've been teaching also at the Harvard Business School for some time.
Yes.
And of course you've been meeting a lot of Chinese students, and also both in China and U.S. So Harvard has been really a harbor of Chinese students. I mean, for many years, a lot of people had a good experience here. And now the traffic between the U.S. and China, I mean, on the student exchange, Chinese students still going strong. So how do you feel about a university student from China and other international countries too? So how they perform, and what's the recipe for Harvard to attract so many international students?
I think the recipe is really, you have to. In order to, these students who come to Harvard could go anywhere. And so you have to attract them by being excellent. It's not just the name.
Of course.
Harvard is a famous name, and the reputation of Harvard is greater the farther away you are from the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Yes.
But we have our strengths, and like any institution, we also have our weaknesses. What is the best thing about, most of the Chinese graduates, most of the Chinese students who come to Harvard come not as undergraduates, although we do have wonderful undergraduates from China, but mostly in the graduate programs. And there's something about a PhD program, a graduate program, that is different from undergraduate college. People are admitted to undergraduate colleges in the United States for all kinds of reasons. You're a good football player.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Or you're a championship fencer.
I see.
Or you're a chess wizard, or whatever. But also, it's very diverse points of view. It's an unusual thing with American higher education.
So they pay more attention to the personalities, traits, and their specialty
and
talents.
We've always tried to bring the most diverse class possible to the campus, and have been expanding significantly our outreach to students whose families are not wealthy families, for whom we give financial aid. Very significant. 70% of our undergraduates are on financial aid.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
At Harvard. You don't have to be rich to come to Harvard. That's our message. But we have to keep repeating it and work at it. The graduate school is different because it isn't a central admissions office. It is every single department admitting purely on the basis of academic merit and promise.
Oh, I see.
So it is the most meritocratic part of American higher education. And that is, and the fact that we have so many Chinese as the largest cohort of any international grouping here at our graduate school shows you that the education that these people have received in China is extraordinary enough that we want to bring that talent also here. And again, if we are restricted, the Trump administration tried to restrict this, but Harvard and other universities resisted, and the Biden administration has been very helpful in bringing students over, providing visas, and so on. What we have to work on now is the other side. That is, because of zero COVID, there are almost no Americans studying in China.
Yeah.
There are like 290,000 Chinese studying in the United States and 252 Americans studying in China. Now that's mostly, it was never going to be a high number, and as high a number, for all kinds of reasons, including language, but also zero COVID policy made it impossible for students to go. So this year, for the first time, this Harvard China Fund that I oversee, where we've sent 20 plus students to work in internships this summer in China. We have an undergraduate student group that is sending 100 students to work with Chinese high school students this summer. We are trying to bring our students back to China. We're starting a summer school with Fudan University next summer. So we are trying, but we have to push hard.
Yes. That's right. I think now, because with the COVID, that China totally open now.
Yes.
And welcome all the foreigners, the 10-year multiple entry visa, all valid, and then people can apply more visas.
Right.
And then, all the universities are geared up to welcome international students, particularly students from U.S. too. So this is really great news. You are a champion for that. I mean, you're also the head of Harvard Shanghai Center, and then conducted so many activities. So maybe mention a bit about the Harvard Shanghai Center. What is the purpose and how they can facilitate the exchanges and between China and the United States and Harvard, of course.
So this center was founded in 2010. It's in Lujiazui, in Shanghai. And it houses a research staff from Harvard Business School working on business school cases. It houses faculty and students who come to work in China for periods of time. We have conferences and workshops, either in executive education for the business school, or much more commonly today, conferences on issues of public health, or from Harvard Law School. We have a disability program that has worked very successfully in China. Harvard Kennedy School, virtually every school at Harvard University has hosted a program or more with our Chinese counterparts at that center. And through our Harvard China Fund, this academic venture fund, we give grants to faculty who have to work and will work with their Chinese counterparts on issues related to modern China, of importance to modern China. And they give seminars and workshops also at this center. So before COVID, it was very busy.
Yes.
Last 3 years, not so busy.
No.
So it's our job to restart it.
Yes.
But our mission right now is not just to restart where we are in Shanghai. We are looking also to expand our footprint elsewhere in China, in Beijing or perhaps in South China. We don't know yet. It's very early days. But we are trying to give the message that we are not retreating from China. We would like to deepen our relations with China.
That's great. I mean, you can see you've been already 3 times in China this year. I mean, we hope to come back more. And now talk about, we talk about so much about university, Harvard, and your new book. And now I'd like to go a little further. And because of, I mean, I was in Harvard, 13 years ago, and then, at that time there was really a lot of exchanges, and then the Sino-U.S. relation was really in a
very good
great shape. And now for the last several years, in particular last 5-6 years, we see a decline of China-U.S. relations, and you being at this forefront of course, teaching how to do business in China, and of course, receiving the scholars from both China and the U.S. So you're also an expert on China itself. So what do you think? What went wrong, and how we can, at least maintain this people-to-people exchange, and then maybe how we can lift from that. I'm glad that the Secretary Blinken, and Secretary Yellen, and Secretary, these John Kerry and even Dr. Kissinger, the 100 years old,
Yes,
all went to China.
Amazing, amazing, yeah.
Yeah, it's remarkable. So can we really pull this back a little bit and then stabilize? I mean, not, of course, we understand we have to compete, but we also have to collaborate. Just like I was talking to Graham Madison at the Munich Security Conference, and he said we have heard too much about competition, less about cooperation, and at least we should hear the same amount of cooperation and competition, or even more of cooperation. So from a Chinese top expert, what's your over assessment, and where are the future we can work together?
Well, it is a very worrisome trend, because I think you have, in some sense, there are certain outcomes that come from domestic politics in both countries. And you have a kind of a mutual suspicion, a mutual paranoia, which is not a good environment for sound policy making. And both countries have taken, I fear, rather too short-term a view toward their strategic relationship, because this relationship is the most important bilateral relationship in the world today. And I fear that both are managing the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, and even year-to-year relationship, but the kind of strategic vision, for example, that Kissinger had in his day, it's difficult to see that from either side, quite frankly, at the present. Where do we think this relationship is going? China will be here forever. The United States has been around for not quite as long as the Qing dynasty. But it has, I think, a very, very promising future. These two countries have enormous issues to solve, excuse me, including climate change. Look at what has happened in both countries this summer, the horrific heat wave, and now this terrible flooding in Beijing, and so on. Really unexpected turbulence of a natural sort, but also in part man-made. And these are the two greatest polluters in the world. What is their collective responsibility? So far, neither side has stepped up to the degree that is. How do they solve, the biggest strategic issue of East Asia, which, in my view, is not the Taiwan question? Which, history has shown that that question may not need to be resolved in a fundamental way for people to cooperate and to thrive across the Taiwan Strait. But I worry deeply about the situation in Korea, in North Korea. Think of this, and this is something that I don't hear my Chinese friends worrying about, or the American side, quite frankly. If North Korea continues to have nuclear weapons, so from a Chinese point of view, I sometimes joke that the greatest strategic danger for China is nuclear weapons in North Korea, because you don't know where one of their missiles might land, and you're closer than anybody else.
That's right.
But if they continue to have nuclear weapons, inevitably South Korea will have them. South Korea has them, Japan will have them, Taiwan could have them. This is a disaster geopolitically for China. And a long-term strategic view of both the United States and China, how do they work together to establish, a more stable situation on the Korean Peninsula? A stable situation that is stable enough that at some point the American troops go home from the South. But it's that, I don't know what the solution ought to be, but it's that lack of long-term thinking that really does. Right now we're both managing that, assuming that worse things cannot happen, but I can guarantee you worse things can happen than where we are today.
No, thank you. You have some very unique, actually, insightful views on this. I think that's true, because China has been growing and developing, and then for its open door policy, and also of its embrace the globalization, WTO, and particularly the exchanges with the world. So China now becomes second largest economy of the world, and then China has been, also the largest trading nation was 140 countries, and they contribute over 1/3 of our global GDP. So I'm thinking, the U.S. used to have a view, okay, China, we support you join the WTO, and then you could converge, become, okay, similar to our system. But as you said, China is a big country, 5,000 years history, and its own cultural characteristics. And U.S. is a big country with a very, the largest economy in the world. So the two countries probably could not converge each other, maybe, but then we will see how we can work together and coexist peacefully. So this probably take some time. I mean, I remember last time when I was talking to Joseph Nye, he was telling me, maybe, by 2035 or 2040, another 10, 15 years, we may have another cycle of coming back and a new equilibrium. I remember I talked to many Harvard professors, even including Tony Satt. He has received so many Chinese visitors in his capacity. No Harvard professor I talked to have actually, in favor of decoupling. And now we're talking about the risk, but also, and then nobody really want to have the Cold War. I mean, even Graham Bellin has warned on that. We should find a way to escape Hushi's trap. So I think this visit of high senior officials to China, and then probably Chinese visit to U.S. Could help to have a better understanding. And I hope that at G20, President Xi, President Biden, or even at the APEC summit, they can really meet again, maybe for twice, so that we can try to find some stabilizing factor. So one of the questions I have is that if we can have a more multilateral system or some kind of coexisting formula, and then to both U.S. and China can really accept each other, because this binary view of autocracy and democracy may not working, because China does have a different system there. So what do you think about in the long run how we can peacefully coexist? Because I see this talent, student exchange is still very strong, trade is very strong. Last year they have actually break the record, China-U.S. trade numbers, and again, I know a lot of companies are not happy. For example, 70% of Chinese energy depends on the import. China spend more to import chips than energy. And then if this CHIPS Act or CHIPS ban on selling high-end chips to China, that billions of losses, trillions, for the U.S. companies, and then the argument they have, they cannot support R&D without China buying that. I mean, the reason Taiwan, South Korea, Japan become the largest chip makers is because they're close to China and they sell to China, and China can also subcontract in many of those manufacturing. So this kind of a decoupling or de-risk model is not really productive. And you are the business professor, so what do you think about how we can really co-work together and in the 21st century?
Well, I think it's very important to focus on those areas where we must work together.
Yeah.
And then on those areas where we absolutely can work together. So you have a kind of as I said, this mutual paranoia, the fear that each side has a deep hatched plot that will be to the detriment of the other side. This is in the political elites of both countries, not so much in the general population. And public opinion is very malleable. 60% of Americans had a positive view of China before Trump was president. Now it's 80% negative. The damage that his administration did in this area is really incalculable.
Yeah.
But I think, if you look at one area, the CHIPS Act in the United States has a foreign policy too easily defined by sanctions rather than by incentives.
Yes.
And China has a foreign policy, not by sanctions, but China has managed over the last 5 to 8 years to antagonize almost all of its East Asian neighbors. Rather than being the big brother of its East Asian neighbors, its relations with many of its East Asian neighbors are worse than they were 10 or more years ago. And that drives them more toward seeking help from the United States. So it is, you have a kind of mutually reinforcing set of affairs. But I think from the point of view of business, right now we're in a situation in which, things are a little bit flipped. That, excuse me, Chinese governments, local governments, provincial, municipal governments are welcoming foreign business back into China.
Yes.
In an aggressive way. And if you're an American company doing business in China today, your biggest political risk doesn't come from Beijing, it comes from Washington, because you don't know where the next set of regulations can be. And so my personal view is that in multiple areas, in technology as in other areas, but as in education, it isn't true that one side has to win and another side has to lose. Who, after all, is the leader in the world of semiconductors? It's a company, not a country. It's Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, an extraordinary company built with government support in the 1980s, but it was private initiative and entrepreneurship on the part of Morris Chang and others, now his successor, Mark Liu, have made this a company without peer in the world of semiconductors. They invest in mainland China. They invest now in the United States. They are a truly global company that is based in Taiwan. And yet both sides, and particularly the American side most recently, have kind of restricted the kind of freedom of, market considerations for that company in deciding where next and possibly to invest. Hence this large investment in Arizona. And at the end of the day, the United States, which today produces about 12% of its high-end microprocessors, will end up producing 15% of its microprocessors in the United States.
Yes.
Will that make us feel more secure? I don't quite get the policy. I think it does have some real strengths, but TSMC has to play the geopolitical risk of appeasing the Americans while also maintaining their contacts throughout the world, including in mainland China.
Yes.
As Morris Chang is one of the most remarkable business people I've ever met. I've done 3 or 4 business school cases on TSMC.
Oh, good, yes.
And he was a Harvard freshman.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And when he was here as a freshman, he came to love English literature, and he wanted to be an English major.
I see.
And when he told his father that he wanted to be an English major, his father forced him to transfer down the river to MIT to get a real education in engineering.
Okay.
That worked out very well.
Okay.
But he is, a remarkable talent, and has built this company that is, at some sense, it's geopolitical risk. If the Americans and the Chinese really care about this global economy, they should care significantly about the prosperity of a company that has no peer in the high-end world of semiconductors.
That's right. I think you cited this good example of this Morris Chang. He does made a huge contributions to the global high-tech industry, and particularly this case of this company that he founded, TSMC, is remarkable, and also of course is a Chinese in Taiwan who has actually built this very reputable global market. But I think also it strive together with the Asian market and global market.
Of course.
And so now they want to cut off the biggest market. China buys 40% of semiconductors worldwide, and then that is really hurting all those bottom lines of all the companies. So the policy may not be wise. I'm expecting Secretary Raimondo is visiting China this month, and hopefully we could get some more clarification as to how many things they can lift or stop. For example, there's 1,300 companies or individuals on American entity or sanction list. Maybe there's a few from China too, but it's really incompatible. Maybe we could stop that or lift some of that, and that even this defense minister could be lifted so that he can talk to the U.S. defense minister, or the Hong Kong chief exec can be lifted so he can attend the APEC summit. I mean, there's a lot of things that.
No, these when it's an interesting. It has really gotten more than a little bit out of hand.
That's right.
Sanctions are what you do when you have no. You want to show an opinion.
Yeah.
And have some influence, but the number of cases where international sanctions have actually achieved their purpose is very few.
Yeah.
South Africa under apartheid is one example of eventually achieving something.
Sure.
But look at the American sanctions on Cuba, which began in 1960. How successful have they been?
That's right.
So
it's very counterproductive. Another example is I know there's a research lab which plays a key role in stop fentanyl coming to the United States, but that has been under sanctions. So basically,
I didn't know.
Yeah, discourage them and paralyze them for doing more. So I think we should probably abandon this kind of keep sanctioning each other.
Well, one company that I've studied very well is one of the greatest apparel makers in the world, a shirt maker. It's called Eskel. It's headquartered in Hong Kong, but it produces in China.
Yeah.
And at its height, it made more than half of the high-end men's cotton woven shirts in the world, and made from excellent Xinjiang cotton, buying cotton from Uyghur farmers in Xinjiang. But they were accused, quite wrongly in my view, a very poor bit of research, they were accused by some nonprofit of using forced labor in Xinjiang, which they deny.
Yeah.
And I've actually been to the plant that they were accused of, which is almost entirely automated. So I think it is a mistake.
Yes.
But they have invited in, so they want to get off this entity list. They're on the entity list.
Yes.
They've lost many markets around the world because of it. And they would welcome international visitors to come and look at the facilities and to judge for themselves.
Yeah.
But then the Chinese side won't let the international visitors come and look.
Oh, yeah.
So they're caught between
that's
global tensions between China and the United States.
Yeah, we should have more visitors. I mean, I think Xinjiang should, probably they are welcoming all the visitors. We know there's some ambassadors going, some journalists, but we should, welcome even more so that some myth and some misunderstanding and interpretation can be clarified. But I know that, we know that Chinese companies sometimes also have a hard time in the U.S. You are the business professor, for example. This ByteDance the CEO has been grilled at 6 hours in the Congress, and then they were worried about this. TikTok has some national security issues. But sometimes I was wondering. I mean, we talk about Taiwanese companies. I know we know that the Apple and Jerry Gould, Foxconn. Apple produced more than 90% of its old gadgets, phone, iPad and computer, everything in China. And then there's no national security issue. I mean, But then, so probably we should not paranoia of really suspect each other so much that we really should trust, the industry, as you said. I mean, the industry really knows what's the best, and then they are going to stick to the rules and the regulations. China also actually, Ministry of Foreign Affairs has put a proposal of 8-point of a data initiative, which says any company operating in the foreign countries from China, they are not required, or they should not report their data back to the Chinese government. If Chinese government wants to have it, they should talk to the government of the other countries. So there's rules, regulations there, but then a lot of the communication has not been there, and people just see some headlines and news.
Well, TikTok is one of these great examples.
Yes.
Just imagine the two greatest countries in the world today having a dispute over a teenage video app.
That's right.
As one of the central areas of confrontation. It's absolutely insane.
Yes.
And of course, TikTok is extraordinarily popular in the United States. And so I think with several states, I forget which one, Montana, has forbade TikTok to be shown or used in schools or in other things. Public officials, in different state governments have been told that they can't make a TikTok or, these people, of course, have no idea how to do it anyway.
That's right.
They're too old.
Yes.
You have to be young and imaginative
in
order to do well with that app. But I think this is an area where here's where I would hope that we could see some real progress in coming years. More Chinese private companies investing in the United States, because many would like to.
Yeah.
Obviously, who's the leader of battery technology?
Yeah.
It's China,
Yeah.
right? CATL, BYD, others in China. Ford, with its licensing agreement with CATL, this is a very important step. If the Americans are going to move toward electric vehicles, we have to work closely with China in order to do this. And we should be welcoming Chinese automobile manufacturers doing EVs and others in the United States. And I can guarantee you that if it were possible politically, any mayor or governor of any state in the United States would welcome Chinese investment in it. Let me give you one example of a company that I know very well, because it was my very first business school case was on Wanxiang.
Oh, Wanxiang, yes.
Wanxiang in
Mr. Li,
Mr. Li, but now it was Lu Guanqiu.
Okay, Lu Guanqiu is the father.
Founder.
Yeah.
Founded this company in 1969 at the height of the Cultural Revolution. The worst year in Chinese history to found a company, I think.
Yes.
About.
Yes.
But he eventually starts to make universal joints for trucks and cars, gets into the state plan 10 years later. Now the largest auto components manufacturer in China, which is the largest automobile manufacturing country in the world. But he invests, and his son-in-law, Ni Pin,
yeah, that's right, Mr. Li. Yes.
Here in Chicago, they invest in the United States in a dying industry, auto parts, in the first decade of this century, when this industry is going downhill. And they help to revive a number of companies, save tens of thousands of jobs, and also learn how to improve their own product back home, are extraordinarily profitable. They now are making a hybrid sports car in California. And, when Lu Guanqiu passed away about 3 years ago in Hangzhou, he had a memorial service in Hangzhou. There were memorials for him in Beijing, and there was a very large memorial for him in Chicago, overseen by the governor of Illinois and the mayor of Chicago. Two people who mostly didn't agree on anything.
That's right.
They agreed that they wanted to honor
Mr. Lu,
who had invested so much in the upper Midwestern economy, and whose company, Wanxiang, had become a great corporate citizen. This is a model that other Chinese companies can follow. It's not easy, but the opportunities are here. If the geopolitics can recede a bit and allow business to proceed on business terms.
That's precisely the great point that you've been raising. I think there's many state at the local level, at the municipality level. I mean, if in the old days they would really continue to help, but also now we need to really boost the U.S. economy, and also China wants to go in global. And then I see this area, particularly with pressure of the climate change. I mean, the clean technology that China already developed. I mean, EV car is already the biggest manufacturing in the world now. And you can see Elon Musk, how successful he is in China. Half of his EV car produced in China. And then he become the richest man in the world. And then you have also, KTL, you mentioned that they're working with Ford now. And then they are the biggest battery manufacturer in the world. And then you have also, I'm a personal friend of Mr. Wang of Huiyao Glass.
Oh yes, of course.
He actually opened his big factory in Ohio, which I think President Obama even participated in his documentary, American Factory, and many people like that, and of course BYD is also doing enormous. So China is leading in the wind power, solar power, and electric power, and battery power. I mean, we're facing this climate change, and we want to, as two largest emitters in the world. I mean, China is even larger, so we can actually have many things to work between Chinese companies, U.S. Local governments, and U.S. business, and Chinese local governments too. So I think we have brilliant example. You mentioned about Lu Guanqiu in Chicago. We have Elon Musk in Shanghai. Those are really perfect examples. We should have more of that. So I really think that I agree. I noticed the administration now talking about small yard hand fence. That yard really wants to be smaller and smaller, and then really all largely like Yellen has saying, all the large business should continue. So we should really do that. So I really agree what you just mentioned.
Well, you know, on energy policy, both countries have different approaches. Of course, the rhetoric is all about clean energy
Yes.
on the Biden administration and from President Xi
Yeah.
and his team. And yet the reality is that China is the leader in green energy, but it's also building more coal-fired power plants every day than any place in the world for energy security.
Yes, yes, yes.
And here you have in the United States, you have many people on the more liberal or left side of the political spectrum seeking more and more green energy.
Yeah.
And yet many people on the Republican side in particular think we need to reinvest more in oil and gas and so on for energy security. So you have conflicting views in both countries and conflicting realities.
Yeah, yeah. I think we should you know, really have more. I hope that this COP28. I also hope that the recent visit of John Kerry, that you know we could reach some more understanding. Absolutely. I mean, that China already announced they're not going to build the coal-fired plant outside China or Belt and Road countries. But I think domestically there are some balancing issues. But I think eventually, as they develop this clean technology, they should really gradually phase out all those coal-fired. So that's really important for China.
It'd be a major challenge.
Yes, yes, Melinda. So now maybe we come to our last part of our discussion. I know that you travel a lot internationally, and of course U.S.-China is now at every conference, at every forum, and become the deep subject of many of the discussions. And I know that recently, you know, I mean, recent 2 years we have this war on Ukraine. I mean, I even wrote an op-ed in the New York Times last year in March when the war broke out. You know, we said China should play some, you know, positive role, mediating role, or promoting the peace and talks. And I would do see China's government propose 12-point peace position paper on that.
Yes.
So now, with this war still drags on, it's still also very dangerous now. I mean, U.S. is absolutely also involved with NATO and support. And so how do you see this prospect and how China and U.S. can work together? I mean, EU also is very, very important. So is there a possibility that U.S., EU, and China, we have a trilateral mechanism that really works on this issue with UN, with maybe have, as I said at the New York Times op-ed, maybe we could have a 7-party talk, you know, P5 plus EU plus Ukraine. And so this is really, I mean, in many minds of European countries and of course American too. China wants to see the peaceful end of this conflict, and then you know China doesn't really side it with Russia. I mean, of course, China wants to probably some neutral position, but then in order to really convince both Russia and Ukraine, China couldn't be 100% position as US or EU.
No, sure.
Yeah. So on this, I don't know if you have any.
I do have views on it.
Sure.
You know, countries sometimes, you know, and the United States, our recent history is full of major foreign policy mistakes or foreign policy errors.
Yeah.
Look at, you know, Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean, these are, you know, own goals, as one would say in the world of soccer.
Yes.
In the world of football, really, but at a great cost to the country and a cost to those countries. I think major foreign policy mistakes. I fear that the alignment of China with Russia during the Winter Olympics of 2022 was also such an occasion, given the long history of Chinese-Soviet relations, the very up and down history of Chinese-Soviet relations. But it was absolutely to the detriment of China's relationship with Europe, because China, 2 weeks after Mr. Putin visited President Xi, a war breaks out. And people have to believe that the Chinese side gave Russia a blank check to do what it wished. They not that they could stop it, but surely Mr. Putin will have told them what might happen. The most famous blank check in diplomatic history was that Germany gave Austria in 1914. Serbia is a troublesome neighbor. Go ahead and deal with Serbia after the events of June of 1914. And this blank check unleashes World War I. Blank checks are very expensive to cash, as it turns out. 2 years later, the German general leading the war, a gentleman named Ludendorff, writes to a friend about Austria, Germany's ally. And he says, we are allied to a corpse. And Austria, a little bit like Russia today, a great and ancient empire that is having difficulty holding on to its periphery. And sometimes in the decline of empires in world history, that is when they are most dangerous. And here you see, from one point of view at least, Mr. Putin seeking to regain territory that had been formerly part of the Soviet Union by invading a sovereign country that China recognizes as a sovereign country. So China is now in a very difficult position because it believes in the sanctity of borders. It believes in national self-determination. It believes in the Charter of the United Nations on the sanctity of borders. It believes that countries should not interfere in each other's internal affairs. And yet it has tacitly, but not explicitly, backed the Russian side in this. But it has come at enormous cost of China's relations with Europe, because a war has been unleashed on the doorstep of Europe for the first time in a large scale since World War II. So this is a heavy responsibility on the Chinese side, in my view. And so perhaps with that responsibility comes the authority to actually then do something significant. I think China could be a broker of peace in this war. I think the Ukrainians have maintained very professional relations with China, and China has maintained professional relations with Ukraine. It will have a greater influence possibly on the Russian side than any other country, almost surely than any other country, if one is to bring this bloodshed to an end in a way that both stops the aggression, stops the killing, leads, I hope, to a withdrawal, but also to whatever security needs that need to be addressed on the Russian side, which have not been particularly well articulated. So it is, but it is a terribly damaging war. Of course, most damaging of all to Ukraine, where you see these beautiful cities being attacked, civilians being killed for reasons that really harken back to a war that happened more than 100 years ago.
Yeah, no, that's it's very unfortunate, very very tragic, and it's shocked the whole world. I mean, we haven't seen any war broke out in the last 77 years after the Second World War on the European continent, and this is probably the largest scale war that we ever seen in the modern human beings, and that's really, you know, and also the modern war that you showed on the television set every day and on the social media, that's really affect everybody, and so.
And you think of it from where, you know, China today is, in my view, the best strategic position of its modern history. There is no country that actually threatens China's borders today. Certainly not Russia, not Japan, not Taiwan, not Vietnam, not India, although there are tense relations with many of these. No one threatens China's borders today. And China has prospered because we are today, from 1979, the end of the battles with Vietnam, Chinese-Vietnam War in 1979, we are in the longest period of peace in East Asia since the Opium War. That peace is the precondition of prosperity. That peace allows for investment from the outside into China. It allows for Chinese entrepreneurs to have confidence in their future. It allows for Chinese governments to invest in the future of their country and in the infrastructure that has helped make China so strong today. Peace is the precondition of prosperity. And anything that endangers peace endangers everything. And this is why talk of war, wherever it is, whether it's in Korea, at Taiwan Strait, anywhere, is dangerous because it increases the possibility simply to talk about it and to prepare for it. The great diplomatic historian, British historian, A.J.P. Taylor once said, war is never inevitable until it breaks out. But when it does, then you do not know what the consequences will be.
That's right. It's so devastating. And of course, in the modern life, I mean, I mean, the current generation, nobody experienced war. I mean, probably their grandfathers or mothers. I was visiting the European Union in May with one of the senior officials, and then they were sitting a row of senior officials of European Commission on the opposite side, and the head of the table, he said, look, our ancestor, our grandfather, all from different countries, we used to fight, but now we're sitting at one table. So European Union, I mean, we see a war broke out there is really, on their border is really dangerous. And absolutely, China, as you said, probably enjoying the peacetime they've seen in the last 75 years, because China has 4,000 kilometers borders with Russia.
Yeah.
And, used to be a big warrior for China also, And so absolutely right. Now China, Russia depends quite heavily now on economic trade with China. I think China is in a good position. China also the largest trading partner with Ukraine.
Yes.
And also after the war, China could be the largest reconstruction of Ukraine as well.
Absolutely.
Reconstructor. And
so would be the best use of Belt and Road.
That's right.
Imaginable.
That's right. But also Ukraine is a signing country to the Belt and Road as well.
Right.
So I think there could be a way that U.S., EU, China can talk together and then bring Russia and bring Ukraine to the table. And then if China is there, I mean, both sides will say, okay, we because China is here, is a neutral party, we are willing to compromise and do something. So at least we should start some process. And absolutely, I think it's important that this soft power China recently is more and more having. After breaking the deal with the Iranian and Saudis,
yep,
it's getting there, and
yep,
hopefully we could better use that. And your advice is really important. So Bill, last time I imagine we were attending the advisory board meeting for Duke Queensland University.
Yes,
That's
indeed.
really,
yes.
We are both sitting on that advisory board. But I want to conclude, because we are today at Harvard, at the heart of Harvard, the largest Harvard library of the U.S. campus. So Harvard has a long tradition with China. We'll talk a bit about that. But I know that there are still many schools here at Harvard. Like we know you are at the Harvard Business School, but you used to also be the dean of Arts and Humanities faculty, and we have a Fairbanks Center, we have a Yanjin Center, we have a Harvard Yanjin Institute, we have Harvard Kennedy School, and Design School, Education School. So it seems there's a lot of bonds and connections that China has. And also you talk about the stone that Hus has donated here. I saw that is a really very noticeable. So maybe we want to conclude as to, and also including the Shanghai Center that Harvard has only outside the campus in the world. So as a China, China-U.S. academic changes, particularly Harvard and China, you are the leading figure for that. Maybe we can conclude on the further exchanges. And also, what about those activities of different schools that are they still very active, or how can they do more and in the future?
Yeah. They have remained as active as possible, happily thanks to Zoom and other things over the course of zero COVID. Our School of Public Health worked very strongly with Chinese counterparts.
Ronnie Chan donated the school.
So Gerald and Ronnie Chan
both of them
named the school for their father,
the
T.H. Chang School of Public Health here at Harvard.
That's right.
But our colleague Winnie Yip, who runs the China program there, is extraordinarily active. She's in China, I believe, right now.
Oh, great.
Working on issues of public health, both in rural areas, which is her specialty, but also that school worked closely with Chinese counterparts in the first years of COVID on dealing with the public health, response in China and elsewhere to the COVID pandemic. Our School of Design has worked extraordinarily well with local governments as well with firms on design issues and urban planning in modern China, actually for more than a century. We have city plans that go back. I once wrote an essay about how Nanjing became the capital in 1927, and we have the original city plan for Nanjing as the capital.
Yes,
it would have been and it was a beautiful capital. Still a beautiful city today. So every school of Harvard has an engagement with China that's very, very important.
Yes.
And every school wants to continue. Our School of Education, we have wonderful Chinese graduate students who come on a very frequent basis. And right now I'm editing a volume about innovation in higher education with my colleague Howard Gardner of the School of Education. And of course, a number of these case studies of innovation are to be found in China today. So, we have so much to look forward to.
Yes.
Harvard Yenjing Institute, founded in the late 1920s, has brought to Harvard so many generations of talent from China to Harvard who have made a big impact here at Harvard and then returned to make an even bigger impact, we hope, back in China. And the reason I'm so passionate about re-engaging and deepening our commitment is this. I was a student of John Fairbank.
Okay, I see.
北江清教授.
Yes.
John Fairbank learned his Chinese history at Tsinghua University in the 1930s. He was a student of Jiang Tingfu, the great historian who was educated on a Boxer Indemnity Scholarship at Oberlin and at Columbia, became chairman of the history department at Tsinghua. And Fairbank was served in the consulate, in the embassy in Chongqing during the war, came back to start China programs here. He had a strong sense of academic collaboration from the 1930s, 40s, into the early 50s. And then it was cut off by the Korean War on both sides.
Yeah.
And it would not restart until the early 1970s. And he said one of his biggest regrets in life to me once was the cutting off of these academic friendships and relations with Chinese universities and Chinese scholars.
I see.
And he said this with great regret in the 1970s. I would say that we are determined that that not happen again.
No.
We share, broadly speaking, the same values as our Chinese counterparts. For political reasons, there are difficulties on both sides in acting upon those values at times. But in the year 2013, Chinese university presidents from the C9 group, the 9 leading universities, signed with the American Association of Research Universities, the British, I think, Russell Group, the Australian Group of 8, a series of principles about what are universities for. They are for freedom of research and teaching. They are for academic autonomy and self-governance. And they are for the creation of knowledge in an unfettered environment. And this reminds me of a very famous phrase at Tsinghua University. There was a scholar named Wang who committed suicide in 1927 for political protest against the nationalists. And his colleague, Chen Yingge, wrote a memorial to him saying that his was a 独立之精神，自由之思想, a spirit independent and a mind unfettered. Those are the values held dear at Tsinghua University. Those are the ones that we hold dear here at Harvard. And we need to act on them to the highest degree possible to increase our mutual understanding and our cooperation.
Yes, that's really a great, recall of all those historical inspirations and moving stories, and also, of course, still inspire us to continue. And I remember when I was here, I spent a year at Harvard Kennedy School as a senior fellow, and it was really a lot of learning. I mean, the campus here, the exchanges, and also the attitudes to welcome Chinese students was enormous. And I remember during that time, same time with me was Pan Gongsim. He was one of the fellows. Now he's the governor, just promoted governor of People's Bank of China.
This is wonderful.
Yeah, he was a New World Fellow at that time. We were together. And then there's another New World Fellow, Mr. Wang Zhongwei, now become the governor of Guangdong province. So you can see how Harvard has...
Well, I see, and one person I came to know very well in working on this Schwarzman College, Schwarzman Shuyan, was President Chen Jining.
Yes.
And I visited him in Shanghai recently.
Yes.
Now that he is
the party secretary there.
Okay. Shanghai. And he was, I think, the most amazing university president, one of the most amazing
he got his PhD
that I have ever met.
UK, yes.
From the UK.
Yes.
Extraordinarily talented, remarkable man. Assisted this program, but he brought Tsinghua to another level in just a short period of time. And of course, he's doing very well in Shanghai today.
Yes.
So I don't. We would love to see him come and visit us here at Harvard.
Of course, of course. No, very much. Time flies, and we've been talking for an hour and a half, and it's really great. I mean, you've been leading these efforts and then promoting academic people-to-people exchanges between China and USA, and of course Harvard and many universities in China. That's remarkable, and so we really appreciate your time to talk to me, and also we would really want to continue this cooperation and also the inspiration that we're having from each other. But also I really appreciate at the beginning of your opening remark, you mentioned about engagement with the world. And then that's the history of all the universities, and probably that's also the spirit of all the countries. We need to engage, not to decouple and not to de-risk. So once again, I really appreciate
Well,
your time.
one thing maybe you can show when the program airs, you can show the cover of my book,
Okay.
which shows a beautiful building at the Nanjing University campus.
Oh, great. Yes.
This Nanjing Daxue de Beidalo, the great northern building
Okay.
of Nanjing University.
That's right. Yes.
And it's in a beautiful Chinese style. It was built not by today's Nanjing University, but by Jinling Daxue,
Oh, I see.
which was a Chinese-American joint venture,
Yeah.
1919, in a beautiful Chinese style,
Yeah.
by an American architect.
Oh, I see.
And that American architect was an ancestor of one of my colleagues here at Harvard,
Oh.
Professor Dwight Perkins in our economics
I see.
department.
Okay, all the
So-
relationship. Yes.
Universities, architecturally, you could look at Harvard, which has its emulative architecture from different parts of the world, including from Britain.
Yeah.
But universities are architecturally and intellectually international
Yes.
in origin.
Yes.
And we must always remember that.
Yeah, let's keep it international, keep global, keep engagement.
Great.
So, Bill, thank you very much for
And
your
Henry,
time.
thank you so much for the work that you're doing
Okay.
for dialogue across the Pacific. So
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bill.
Great.
Okay,
Take
good.
care.
Okay, thank you. So we finished this episode of a CCG Special Global Dialogue at Weiner Library at Harvard campus. Thank you very much for viewing this. Thank you. Goodbye.